Hello, my name is Howie Severino. Is our information space being infiltrated by foreign manipulators? Welcome to our new podcast series on foreign information manipulation and interference. For our first guest, we have Dr. Rachel Khan, Professor of Journalism at the University of the Philippines in Diliman and co-founder of Check.ph. So, you decided to start teaching fact-checking as a kind of an antidote to disinformation, or as a response to disinformation, 2017, kind of as a reaction then from what you observed in 2016 during the elections. Of course, the Philippines, it became kind of a tactic in the Philippines, but also in the US, di ba, at that time. Did it influence the outcome of elections, do you think?
I think there was, in a way, it influenced the outcome because there was a lot of information that was outside the normal channels of, media and the usual trusted media. So, and people were starting to pick this up. You could see Facebook pages being created solely to bring out misinformation or disinformation. And it became so rampant. And people, because they were not aware that it could be done, and they still had trust in whatever they could read on the internet, that created sort of like it just spiraled into a lot of disinformation that was being shared by ordinary citizens who could not detect that this was false information. And so part of what we needed to do was to create an awareness that this exists.
These efforts to counter disinformation, what kind of impact have they had, in your opinion?
I think its greatest impact is to create that awareness. In the 2025 Digital News Report, which was finalized and completed by my colleague, Professor Yvonne Chua, it was found that 90% of Filipinos are now aware of disinformation, something that they were not aware of back in 2018. See, so that is for us a major, like they saw it as a problem. Something that for us is already an accomplishment because they already recognize the existence of disinformation. And because of that, they're also wary about the information they consume. And that wariness is a first step to combating this big problem. So I think that alone, that people now have that sense of needing to fact check before they start sharing. I think that has sort of lessened the dangers of disinformation to still a small degree, but still, I think with people becoming more aware and people becoming more savvy in checking information, maybe, this whole of society approach can actually work against disinformation.
And itong 90%, awareness, I mean, it's significant, And nabanggit nyo nga na it has to be a whole of society approach. But however, from your paper, it didn't seem like there was like a government counterpart to all of the civil society efforts na unlike what's happening in other countries, especially in Europe and even in Asia, that there's strong government collaboration with civil society. Bakit sa Pilipinas, parang hindi masyadong active yung ating government, and would you actually be open to cooperating with government, or ano ba yung dynamics doon, Prof?
Well, I think the main problem is we want to keep the constitutional guarantee of free expression and the free press. And the danger of having government involved is it could, that danger of they're the ones defining what is true and what is false might impede our own free press. And so that's why there's this careful approach. And that's why it's also private sector led in the same way that media in this country is private sector led.
Some of the models that we've seen actually have a strong government collaboration with civil society, despite the risks that you mentioned, risk to freedom of speech and all that. I mean, and one model that's been mentioned is the model in Taiwan, where they have a rapid response mechanism based on a group set up by academics like yourself, journalists, etc. There's like civil society groups that monitor falsehoods, no? Obviously, alam naman natin yung danger sa kanila, no? Because they're closer to China than we are, no?
Yeah.
But have those been effective?
Well, I think for Taiwan, it has been.
Okay.
And I think because their citizens and their government are more or less on the same page.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that will work here. I was a guest speaker at the Presidential Communications Office Information Summit. And I suggested to them that they have a fact-checking unit per agency, because what they can do is actually, for their own sake, no, if somebody is spreading false information about a government policy of that agency, they should have a unit in their press office that will correct that wrong information, right? Because the policy is there, but sometimes people misinterpret it deliberately.
So I want to talk about FIMI now, no? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the origins of that term, kasi it might not be familiar to everybody, and then how it's relevant now to our region.
Okay, so FIMI is foreign information manipulation and interference.
Okay.
So it basically means that there are external influences or influence operators outside the country. It could be a state operation, or it could be individuals or private citizens that are not part. Basically, it's external sources of disinformation, and that it's coordinated. So it's a campaign. It's different from an influence operator who's, let's say, a blogger. So that blogger can have their own, causes of disinformation. But this one is bigger because it's a campaign among either several bloggers outside the country or really institutions that either produce inauthentic, coordinated disinformation, or have influencers, individual influencers that want to manipulate the local public sphere.
Okay, we've been talking about disinformation, previously known as fake news, no, for like more than a decade now, no?
But fake news is a deliberate way of creating distrust with the news media.
Okay.
It's a Trump coined term. Why? Because he wanted to discredit legacy media.
Si Trump ba nag-imbento?
Well,
or popularized it?
He popularized it. Basically because he was attacking legacy media. Okay. Right? And then it was picked up here by our politicians also, who also wanted to create a distrust so that it will be the influencers that they have more control over who will be more popular than traditional media. It's a tactic. That's why fake news is an oxymoron, technically, right? Because news, when you define news, at least when I define news in class, it means the truthful, the accurate reporting of an event, issue, and idea. See, but putting the word fake before it, you're manipulating that traditional definition of news.
Unfortunately, mas ginagamit yon.
Unfortunately, yes.
Disinformation is a long word.
But then, right. But then it's also the influencers who are using that term. Why? Because it benefits them. Because they will become the authority rather than the media, right? So that's why it's popular. In a way, it's a chicken and egg thing.
Of course, disinformation has evolved, no? So these days, to what extent is disinformation FIMI?
That's hard to say to what extent, like to put a percentage or a number on it. It's very difficult.
Is it greater now than before?
With the start of social media, I think it started growing also. They saw a platform in which, or several platforms in which they could now influence domestic politics. Now, not just in this country, but in several others. So you have those with the capital and those with the machinery and technology that can now influence domestic politics in smaller, more developing economies. And I think that's why FIMI is something that is of danger, because you don't really need that much capital. You don't even need that many people to, to conduct disinformation. So yes, it's been growing, I think, and it's taking on different hues depending on what issues are, I think, hot at the moment.
Yeah, kaya ko rin tinanong kung, to what extent, or is it growing, etc. It's kasi we've had many conversations about disinformation for for the past decade. Pero parang ngayon lang pinag-uusapan yung foreign aspect of it, no? Is it because the scale of it has increased, or it's always been there, kaso there are now efforts pinpointing it as foreign, or are we realizing now with more research, etc., that a lot of the disinformation from the very start was actually FIMI?
Right. I think it's because of that greater awareness. In the same way that there was very little awareness about disinformation in the early days, and now there's a lot of awareness. So now we're focusing now on who are the actors behind the disinformation. And that's why that information is growing among those combating disinformation. And that, I think that's why it's being talked about. It's being talked about openly, so that people, again, to create an awareness that it's beyond our shores, that the problem doesn't stop, in just the Philippines alone. And also because of, I think the European Union had started really talking about it because they saw a big influx of foreign influence operators during the Ukraine war. And so because of their own findings, we started also studying it locally, which was not really a focus of disinformation studies before, at least in Asia. So
And FIMI itself was kind of coined by EU, right?
Yes, yeah. So it was coined by them, but also the knowledge of how they operate was also plotted by them. It helped the local studies
To analyze
our own problems here. So I think that's why there's a greater awareness, and also why we're only talking about it now, even if probably existed well into 2016 or even earlier, much earlier. But
Yeah, kasi nabanggit niyo yung actors, no? So let's talk about that a little bit. Hindi naman maraming actors ito eh. I mean, in terms of the really big players. I mean, in Europe, kaya, they got really concerned because Ukraine was kind of, may nakikita siyang domino effect dun eh. I mean, and Russia has these ambitions, so they're getting territory from Ukraine, and, which country is next, etc. So they're all like rearming, etc. And then they're all examining the tactics of the Russians here, because Russia supposedly is using disinformation as kind of a war doctrine. Diba? It's like an official part of their war machine. Diba? So there's the hardware and the tanks and all of that, but then in cyberspace, it's like they're just as aggressive. No? In our part of the world, I mean, let's not pussyfoot around the elephant in the room. Diba? We're all thinking about China. Diba? Kumbaga, they're the Russia in Asia. What evidence is emerging na they are engaging in FIMI?
well, let's start with just doing a really minor content analysis on the online news agencies of China, like China News Daily.
It's in Xinhua, right? It's a big one.
So if you just read the news every time there's a conflict in the West Philippine Sea, you would already read that they have a totally different
Narrative.
and often fictitious account of what happened. Right? So, I mean, you don't really have to go that far to see if they're doing it in their official media sites. Then there's a natural assumption that it's also being done in the unofficial sites or their unofficial influencers.
So, Prof, nabanggit niyo yung like the official. Of course, those are obvious. They're open about their government, right? Pag sinabing unofficial, how do we know that they're actually affiliated? Kung unofficial naman yun.
Technically, it's hard to say if they're affiliated or they're just parroting or echoing something of the same nature. But for example, on TikTok, we find that there are TikTok accounts that have no names, that just have DXYZ, and there are a lot of those that have the same opinion or even have the same message. So that already can make you think whether it's inauthentic accounts that have been created precisely to distribute disinformation. And actually, TikTok itself has admitted that they've taken down several sites. I was in one of their ethics meetings about half a year ago. And I asked them about this, and they said, yes, we've detected them, and these will be taken down. And really, when I looked for them again, they were no longer there. So at least they were, despite being a, Chinese owned company, they did obvious disinformation. They did remove. But of course, you take down one, another's created, and okay. So I guess we can differentiate what is coming from local troll farms and FIMI by simply looking at where the messages are being repeated. So for example, the troll farms, when, for example, a journalist is being attacked on Facebook, it's the same message, but the Facebook users are, they have more or less, you see their names. So it could be authentic paid trolls. With FIMI, there's the same message, but mostly coming from, it's very hard to detect what countries they're coming from. So also many times, at least you see on TikTok and Facebook, the names are, because probably it's Chinese characters, sometimes they come out as consonants, because the original, it doesn't pick up on the platform. So instead of you see the characters, you see...
But that's enough to conclude.
That's enough to conclude that at least from a basic
you can say, konektado lahat yan.
Non-technology way of tracking, you could say that these are coming from outside.
Okay.
The thing about FIMI, you know that they're coming from outside, but you don't know whether it's operated or the source is the state, an outside state, or a local paying an outside provider. That's the thing that it's very hard to distinguish. Because if I was a local politician and I hired a company in India, you'd have, you'd have these trolls coming from the outside, and that can be traced that it's coming from the outside, but who's behind it, it's hard to say. That's where I think you will really need a collaboration with the platforms to trace the source. Is it coming from a private entity or a state entity? That's where you need the technology that's beyond a normal fact checker like myself.
That's an example of information laundering where you can't really trace the source kasi ang dami ng pinagdaanan.
Correct.
And then at the end, parang may believable yung information kasi you don't really know it came from this source.
Except for sometimes it's easy enough because the script is the same. Right? Then at least in that sense, you don't really need to be an expert.
So, anong agenda ng China when they, when they're engaging in FIMI? Ano bang, do they want to influence our elections? They want to make sure the next president is on their side? Do they want to, ano bang
I think the goal is simply their interest in the West Philippine Sea. right? And any politician who will support it will have their backing. I think it's really a simple. At least I think it's as simple as that.
Okay, which makes me curious then, ano? Very often their response and their official response, and then what's like repeated in the supposed unofficial networks, often sounds unbelievable. I mean, we sometimes we see video, and what they say is like the opposite of what we saw.
Right, right.
So I'm wondering, it seems so
that-
clumsy considering there's such a big
It's-
power, or
it's
do they
actually-
think it's going to be effective?
I don't think the Filipinos are being targeted at that point. They're targeting their own domestic market.
And their domestic market have not seen what we've seen.
Right.
Okay.
Their domestic market does not have access because
Censorship.
because of censorship. They don't even have Facebook in China, right? So what they say officially is really for the domestic market, so that their support for their government is intact, right? So it might sound ridiculous to us, but to them, they don't care what we think, basically.
And whatever they say is the reality
It's the reality in their country.
because they don't have any alternative information.
Right.
Okay. All right. And of course, it goes back to like political systems na, diba? So, I mean, when we...
It's beyond us.
Yeah, well, we're lucky in a
That's
sense
fair.
because we're able to read what they say, but at the same time, we can compare it to what we actually
Correct.
see.
Correct.
Diba? I mean, there's
Correct.
different sources of
That's the
information.
advantage of having a free press and
Yeah.
freedom of, being able to access the different platforms.
Let's dwell on the fact that TikTok is a Chinese-owned company. I mean, there have been calls to actually restrict TikTok for that reason, and I think in certain countries it might even be banned. And other countries, if you have a government mobile phone, you cannot have the TikTok app, etc. There have been calls to do the same thing
Right.
here. We interviewed the spokesman, one of the spokespersons of the military. They did discourage or even they restrict or prohibit their personnel to have TikTok on their official mobile phones. I mean, that would be an obvious
Yes.
kind of unofficial channel, because if it's Chinese owned, so, I mean, there are suspicions that that's how they get data from Filipinos. I mean, you can restrict, for example, a Filipino general from using TikTok, which he
Right.
probably wouldn't do anyway. But the prohibition wouldn't cover his children, for example,
Right,
diba? I mean, you can
right.
actually track the general through his family, right? So,
Yes.
parang it seems to be a big. If any of that's true, that it's a suspicion, would that be a huge risk?
Yes.
Especially in the Philippines, where TikTok has grown probably faster than almost any other society.
True. So that suspicion remains, although it's being denied by everybody I've talked to in that company. So
Which shouldn't surprise us, right?
Which shouldn't surprise us. So it's very hard to say, or it's very hard to accuse them of deliberately being the spy of the country that owns them. But at the same time, you also have the gadgets themselves. I'd also be wary of gadgets,
Made in China.
right?
Most
made in
Apple
China
phones,
because there could be implants there that you
Yeah.
don't know about. So we could really have that, suspicious mind and think that everything that is internet based or can have a geopolitical, implant can be used against us. So at the same time, what is more obvious are what we see on the platforms, the news, the people, the influencers who are parroting the lines of official Chinese media. I think that one, at least you can say black and white, that they are really producing this information.
Yeah, okay, that's the content. No? Balikan ko lang yung TikTok because it's so popular among everybody. I mean, what do you advise your Gen Z students? No, many of them have TikTok, use TikTok. Should they be, cautious about it, or what do you tell them about this? Then, I mean, they know that you're a scholar in this
Right.
information, no?
But it's still a platform.
Mm-hmm.
And like any platform, it can be used for good or bad. So it's not like I have any government secrets to hide, right? I think out of my normally suspicious mind, I tell anybody who's connected with government or anyone who had information to protect, to not engage, to be careful of what gadgets they buy and where it was made and what platforms are on it. But an ordinary citizen, technically, unless you have a 0-day kind of scenario in your head, I don't see any problem at the moment. People should have that common sense. If they don't have that common sense, diba? So at least that's an awareness that if you can detect something using your common sense, then you also make the job of the fact checkers easier, because we can already focus on the harder to detect technology-based disinformation, right? Like deepfakes.
Okay, well, speaking of which, no, kasi nga, we're also monitoring the midterm elections, and in the months leading up to the midterm elections, there was a lot of talk about deepfakes and how deepfakes is kind of the next generation of disinformation and how it's going to have a huge impact. So we actually had a campaign here. We went to universities, we talked about it. I'm sure you guys did also, etc. And so, kasi pati kami biktima ng deepfakes. Like most of our anchors, myself included, I was selling dietary supplements, and Jessica was selling like weight loss drugs and whatever, Ivan Mayrina, etc., etc. No? So this was last year pa. So early on, we were like kind of educating people. If we had a self-interest, of course, no, but we thought this is kind of maybe a sign of things to come, right? Especially pagdating sa election. Pagdating doon sa campaign itself, the political campaigns, ang observation na maybe it was superficial, but we didn't note a lot of deepfakes used for politics. Kumbaga, I mean, ginamit kami to sell products, right? No politics. Right. But we didn't. It would have been easy to create deepfakes of like political leaders saying things they didn't say, right? Pero wala kaming masyadong napansin na ganon. So to us, that was kind of, nagiging, sabi mo 90% awareness na maybe we're maturing in a way na people, the obvious way of faking videos or information now wasn't deployed as much kasi they weren't deemed to be effective. Did you have the same observation?
Yeah, Check.ph came out with a study that the recent elections had shallow fakes, not deep fakes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Meaning that it could still be detected with just one observation. You didn't need high-tech technology to look at the photographs.
So tama yung aming speculation. Okay. So that's good news.
That's good news. Yeah, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't be alert for the future, because as technology improves and then they make it so available to the public, so you don't need to be a computer expert anymore. So yes, that can happen. So far it's all been detectable. It hasn't been that level yet. So
are we gaining ground in terms of the truth? Sabi niya, 90% awareness, no? But what needs to happen with this awareness?
Well, I think what should be happening is, if you are going to use the same technology to fight disinformation, then it is for the positive, like to what we call pre-bunking, like to give out the correct information or to have a rapid response when you are being attacked by disinformation. And basically, that's using the same technology that disinformers use, but to a positive and in a good way. Laban ng technology to eh. So, and again, any technology or any tool you can use for the good or for the bad. So, in the same way, for example, AI, we use AI precisely to detect disinformation, but it could also be used to create disinformation, right? So it's really a matter of who is using it and for what purpose. So I think that those who want to stay clean in the political sphere, but at the same time not be naive, then use it for in the proper way.
Pamilyar na sa atin ang money laundering. Pero ano naman ang information laundering? At paano ito nakaaapekto sa atin? Paano ito ipinapakalat? Yan ang mga susunod nating tatalakayin sa special series na ito tungkol sa online invasion.